What's up, guys? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Con O Show. And today I am joined by two wonderful candidates, both running for local elections here in Bucks County, and more in particular in Doylestown. These are very, very hyper-local elections. So I wanted to talk about them because I enjoy these candidates, but also I want to bring to mind before May 18th, if you live in Pennsylvania, and before whatever your primary date may be, if you live in a different state and you are seeing this, that getting involved in the primary elections is vital. I will emphasize that many a time in the future. I emphasize it a few times today, but getting involved in these local elections is where you make the difference. Something that I don't talk about enough, and I want to mention here, is when you elect people to these local offices, say township supervisor, mayor, school board, anything, even the county-wide positions, which are a little bit higher up, you are setting the scene for future elections. You are picking who could possibly have that resume that people look for moving forward in politics, because it is not easy to get that first office. But both Larissa and Tabitha were so gracious to give me a full more than an hour discussing things and going back and forth. So I want to thank them for joining me. You guys can check out their websites. I will put them in the description box down below. If you would like to support our show, you can do so by hitting the subscribe button down below, hitting the thumbs up if you enjoy the interview, leave a comment on YouTube, and you could subscribe. You can support the show financially if you so choose, as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/theconoshow. And with all of that, we will get right into the interview. Enjoy. Joining me today, I have Tabitha Dell'Angelo and Lolly Hopwood, both running for local offices. And I want to emphasize, as I probably already did in my introduction, but this is about part 1 million of why local elections are important. So I'm going to kick it off with letting Tabitha and Lolly introduce themselves. So ladies, whoever wants to go first.
You first, Tab.
Okay. I'm Tabitha Dell'Angelo. I live in Doylestown Borough, Pennsylvania. I'm running for Region 8 school director. Most people just think school board, but it's officially school director. And I've got 2 kiddos in the district. One's in middle school, one's in high school. As of, a month from now, that's where they're going. So that's where they would like me to say they are because they're getting big. So that's about it.
I'm Lolly Hopwood. My real name's Larissa, but everyone calls me Lolly. I'm running for mayor of Doylestown Borough. I also live in the borough as well, and have been here for about 22 years. It's home, and I feel like we have a golden opportunity because of the way Doylestown is to really lead the way into a better, more progressive tomorrow. And I hope that we get to do that.
Awesome. So a lot of times when I have a guest on, I ask them to define themselves politically. I know that as a millennial, I don't like labels, but I know that sometimes putting out some sort of baseline of like, hey, I'm a progressive, or I describe myself as a social democrat. What do you guys describe yourself as? If someone says like, what are you politically?
That's a good question.
Sometimes it's a loaded question because it's a tricky one to answer sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in my race that there's 3 of us that are running. I definitely feel like I'm the furthest left, most progressive when it comes to that. I feel like that's such a dirty word for a lot of people, progressive. So I feel like for me, I would like to say I'm a grassroots Democrat. I feel like the power of the people is really important. I feel like I've seen how much just a handful of people can light fires in other people. I see how much growth and how easily that spreads. I believe in the power of the people. And I feel like being able to bring that into our local governments is really how things are going to change for the long haul in this country. So a grassroots Democrat, progressive Democrat, that's me.
Awesome. How about you, Tabitha?
Yeah. Well, I agree with that to a big extent, because I remember I was a Bernie supporter, and one of my favorite. Do you have a Bernie thing? Wait.
You can't see it, but I have in my normal shot. In my normal episode, you can see my Fight the Power poster with Bernie. Yes, I got the Public Enemy poster right here. Let's go. That's great.
Wait. This is how I roll in my office. I've got Bernie. But anyway, so but one of my favorite slogans that his campaign used was "Not me, us," and I really appreciated that. And when I would see him in town halls, and he would say, "If any of us is suffering, that's a problem," and I really appreciated that. I definitely do refer to myself as a progressive. That is the word I use. I agree with Larissa. It's funny because I don't think progressive is particularly radical. I'm just seeing that, on the continuum of like Democrats, Republican, or whatever, like I'm probably a little bit further to the left than maybe like an average Democrat. I don't know. So that's sort of where I am.
I think that's probably why I like you guys. Not to be, too much of but I appreciate someone that's boldly progressive, and that's why you guys are here. Let's dive into some of your races. We'll start, Tabitha, I guess I'll start with you. Like, could you describe what you are running for? Like, what is a school board director? And this is where it kind of piggybacks off of, if you guys haven't seen it already, go check out the Vote Local interview series for the Doylestown Democrats that I've done some of those interviews. But I haven't interviewed someone that's a school board director. So tell me, what does that position do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The school board director is, or all the directors, it's governance, right? It's not management. So it really is oversight. So the school board is does some things that might feel a little bit more boots on the ground. Like they'll approve curriculum, they approve textbooks, but they don't choose it, right? So the idea is that they're supposed to be really in tune with the mission and the vision of the district. And then when curriculum is brought to them, or budget proposals, like all of the things that are sort of in the weeds, what the school board is supposed to do is take a look at that and say, does that lead to fulfilling the mission and the vision that we've stated in the district? And if it does, the school directors are supposed to say, yeah, even if personally they're like, I don't love that. Now, this school board, not in total, it's because the school board turns over, but some of the members of the school board have been part of a movement that has been a little bit more in the weeds with decisions. So they've said no to textbooks, even though they do meet the mission and vision, because it doesn't match their own personal philosophy. So some of them are micromanaging a little bit, overstepping a little bit. And I get that impulse, right? Because anybody who wants to do this cares and has opinions, but that's not really what the school board is supposed to do. The school board is oversight more than anything else.
And I'll put the caveat out there for everyone, the same way I did it with Tiffany when she joined me, but everything that I say doesn't necessarily mean that you guys agree with me, but I will point out that there are people on the school board that don't believe in climate change. There are people that believe in some crazy radical right-wing things, and it's one of the many reasons why we need to elect progressives and just Democrats in general just to this board and flip this board. But if you're watching from anywhere in Pennsylvania, anywhere in New Jersey or anywhere, flipping these boards is super important, because like you said, you are impacting children and what they're learning. And even if you're not handpicking the textbooks, on some level, there is influence there that is possible. Larissa or Lolly, what would you describe the job of mayor as? I know that's actually, I think it might be actually tougher because it is kind of amorphous, but what would you describe the job of mayor as, at least in Doylestown Borough?
Well, it was really beautifully put by a friend of mine. He said that the position of mayor is being the conscience of the community. I think that that's really wonderful. And in Pennsylvania, that's exactly how it is. You know, it's like, it's not just a figurehead position by any means, but that's a really important element of it. It's what's the face of the town? What values do we hold? So it is kind of a lot for one person to kind of hold that position. But in Doylestown, in a lot of boroughs in Pennsylvania, we've kind of seen that happen where it's like one mayor will kind of lead certain initiatives. We had a mayor a couple of times ago, not this past, or the one who's in there right now, but the one before that, Libby White, who did a cleanup initiative where kids would like go up and clean the town up, which is just such a wonderful way of getting people involved. I think that it's also a bridge from the community and from the businesses into the borough, which I think is really important. So, it's less of a legislative job. There's not really any policy that's being decided by a mayor in Pennsylvania, in a borough in Pennsylvania. That's done by borough council. But the mayor, it's really important for the mayor to be able to build bridges, not only from the community into the borough, but also to other boroughs, to other politicians, to make sure that we're having a good relationship and getting things done in our town.
Sweet. All right. What would you describe, and we'll stick with you, Lolly. What would you describe like your number one thing you want to tackle is if you were elected? I know you said like, mayor's not in charge of passing resolutions, but like if you could tackle one issue,
racism.
What would it be?
Racism, definitely. A real small one, like no big deal.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's not like I talk about it all the time on my show either. Like it's a constant thing, but elaborate, go ahead.
So today I had this really interesting conversation. I've been leading a kindergarten pod. So it's 5 kiddos that are like 5 and 6 years old. And one of them has autism and he has a wraparound. So that's for people who don't know what that is. It's basically someone who comes in to kind of like make sure that this one kid is getting kind of the boundaries that he needs that are going to set him up for a successful future. And this guy who's his wraparound lives in Philadelphia. He's a Black man. And he and I over the year have gotten to know each other and talk a lot about feminism, talk a lot about racial issues. Today, we talked about a lot of different things. And one of the things that he said, which I did not realize, is, it's Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And he said that there was an anti-hate bill that got passed, very quickly for that, which is important. That's great and great news. But he said there's an anti-lynching bill that's still sitting in Congress right now that's not being passed. And the fact that it's a big deal, that's still sitting there. But there's other hate bills that are being passed through that this is really about, it's about racism. And I feel like it's our responsibility as a predominantly white town and who does have international coverage to make some very bold statements about things that are okay, things that are not okay, what our policies are, and just be able to show that the racism is not okay in our town, and to embrace all of the Black history that we do have here, because we have a tremendous amount of it in our town, to really kind of show what the actual history is instead of what we've all been going back to our school books, what we maybe have learned in our school about slavery, about the way that the whole American system was kind of put up. That we have a chance right now because people are listening, people are watching, to make some steps to make sure that we are pushing that dial. Because today when I was having that conversation, I think one thing that I've heard from a lot of friends who are of color is that they're concerned that this push is going to end, once one policy finishes, or once one thing is passed. And we need to show that it's like, that's not what allyship is. Allyship is continuing to push and continuing to advocate for people who really haven't been able to see the kind of growth and see the progress that they really need. So yeah, that's my big number one tiny little thing that I really want to change in our town.
And there's a few things to pinpoint there before I ask Tabitha. One is the fight is not over. The same way that electing Joe Biden wasn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of fighting for the next piece. It's the beginning of pushing the ball forward. And, the same thing could be said in the local elections, which I said, this is part 1,010,000 for me to talk about why local elections matter. In Doylestown Township, the supervisor board that I ran for in 2019, and I lost by 38 votes, 0.1%. I lost in 2020. We tried, our Democratic elected official, Jen Herring, tried to pass a Juneteenth resolution and was immediately shot down by the Republicans. This is, even though it's local, it is a partisan board. Electing people that are qualified is important, but electing people that are qualified and hold the right policy prescriptions when they can pass policy is more important. And now that elections are coming around, and I'll point out too, the reason why the Republicans on that board didn't pass the Juneteenth resolution in 2020 was because it was July. And they said, you might feel differently next year. No, we don't feel differently. We know exactly what that means, what that holiday represents, and why we should recognize it. So I get, all up in a, in a fit, because 38 votes would have changed that vote. 38 votes would have changed protecting water, protecting the sewer systems, protecting LGBTQ plus community in Doylestown Township, because up until last year, you're still technically able to fire someone for being gay or being transgender. This is not, we're not living in 1920, we're living in 2021.
Yeah.
So that is, I know that's an aside for me, but I just wanted to pinpoint that because of every municipality, every school board, every county has these elections, and they're just so vital. Tabitha, you can follow that up with, if you could change one thing on the school board, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, actually, there's a lot of synergy here, and so it's good to hear this. So my professional career is really focused on equity, literacy, and social justice education, and so that's something that I think is also important here. And in my preparation for running for school board, I've looked at the 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan that came out in 2017 lists including more equity and inclusiveness in the curriculum, to do like a review of the curriculum, to find out best practices of how to incorporate it. So for folks who might think like, oh, she's so radical, she's going to do this. Well, guess what? 5 years ago or 4 years ago, they put this in the plan, but they haven't done it, right? So it's not radical, and there are people who want it, but it's not getting done. The other thing that's in the plan, in that same category of curriculum, is looking at curriculum that does a better job in terms of depth over breadth. And that's really important too, because there's at least one person on the school board right now who threw into the mix a social studies curriculum that the teachers did not recommend. So the teachers made recommendations for various social studies curricula. And then somebody from the school board said, how about if we add this one to the mix? Now, I think that's a problem, because you're not respecting the professional knowledge of the teachers who are bringing their recommendation. The person who threw this into the mix is not an educator. And the model that was introduced is one that we know prioritizes breadth over depth. So it's about, learning dates and people, and it's like all the most boring things, like not the real history, none of the conflicts, none of the things that actually make kids care about learning. So that is a problem. And, I think that if we look at it more broadly as an equity literate approach, then as a whole, we learn how to recognize when there is inequity, respond to it, and then redress it. And I feel like there are lots of teachers who want to do that the board has been wanting to do that. And it's just not really happening. And unfortunately, what happens is the teachers who do it, and a lot of teachers do, it's like an add-on, right? So they're like, oh, well, this is what the text says, and I recognize that this isn't sufficient, so I'm going to add this on. I'm going to bring in another perspective. I'm going to make this better. But what that does is it takes the core curriculum and all the good, juicy bits that are really going to make our kids better citizens and smarter people and critical thinkers. All of that is marginalized because it's not part of the core curriculum. It's only part of the curricular decisions of some teachers who've thought of it, who've maybe done that kind of work themselves, who find it's important. And so, even schools that do like Latinx studies elective or African American studies elective, then again, it's like, it's in the margins when really all of that needs to be in the core. And it's not that hard to do. It's harder to do actually when it's an add-on, because then teachers are like, oh, now what else do you want me to do? So instead of making it an add-on, let's just have better curriculum all the way around. It's better for all kids. So that's really, that's something, if I could, make something happen, that's something I would fight for.
Yeah. And to interweave my experience with that as someone that has gone through the Central Bucks School District, I had to take a college level AP class in high school to learn advanced American history, to learn AP American history. Like, I shouldn't have had to go out of my way to learn the depths of American history. That is like, that should be throughout our educational system. I was talking to a friend today about, because I had an exceptional educational experience at Central Bucks West, and I had great teachers, but I had to go out of my way to push myself into certain classes, which is not I wouldn't say it's not necessarily the norm for kids to want that. It's not the norm for them to always have the opportunities, because, CB West is different than CB East. It's different than CB South, and every middle school down. But I was talking about how we read King Leopold's Ghost, which I don't know if you guys know that book, but you may. And it's like, that's not a book that you would just be handed in a normal school. It's because our teachers cared to learn or to teach us about certain things that we probably never would have heard about if we didn't read that book. I never would have heard about the Congo and blood diamonds and all that stuff if I didn't read that book. But
Connor, can I just add one thing too? Is that it's also, again, I just want to make the point, not radical. No. So here are two quick points. New Jersey a couple years ago started mandating LGBTQ plus history. So in all public schools, it is mandated to teach LGBTQ plus history. And now it's being mandated to do anti-bias education. Both of those things are K-12. That's New Jersey, right next door. And even the idea of anti-bias education, that also not new. In 1989, there was a book published called Anti-Bias Curriculum. It was by, I think, Derman and Sparks, something like that. 1989, right? None of this is new. The idea of multicultural education started in 1970. So for folks who are like, oh, this is radical, look how slow, to Larissa's point, it's not like we are taking our time to maintain a colonized curriculum. I'll just put it that way.
No, and I appreciate you putting it that way. That is a fact, and I talked about it last week on my show last week about how immigration has created a multicultural nation. America is the melting pot. We're supposed to be the melting pot. We're supposed to be a mixture of different cultures, and that is what American culture is. And I've had debates about that. We don't have one American culture. We have a plethora of cultures that mix and they come together, and that's what makes us great and different. With that, I definitely had something I wanted to say, but I forgot anyway. So we'll move on to my, unless, Lolly, I saw you unmute yourself. If you want to piggyback off that, you certainly can before I go to my next question.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing that I think is really important, just kind of piggybacking on what Tabitha was saying is, so my experience with kids is generally younger kids, although, my kiddo's 12 and, I'm friends with a lot of their friends who are mostly in middle school. But how important representation is. That's one of the fundamental things last year when it's like, everyone was just like, how can I be a better ally? How can I be anti-racist and raise anti-racist kids? That everyone's just like, look at your bookshelf. What's represented there? It's like, do your picture books that you're reading to your 5-year-olds have people of color in them? Do they have people in wheelchairs, like talking about disabilities? Do they have people even with glasses? You think about like all this kind of stuff, that it's so important, just that simple thing, just to have representation. So I think it's so important in the school board or to have people who are going to push these things in the school board, because like Tabitha said, this is not new. These things should have been they should already be there, because they are in other places. They are in other states, in other towns. So whether we're looking at the school board or whether we're looking at the government, it's like we still have a pretty white borough council, and I'm not going to change that. If I get elected, I do think that I'll be the only single mom who's ever been elected to the office of mayor, which is also another kind of representation. But it's like, who are you going to uplift at that point? I think that it's really important. It's like, we need visibility because people are visual. It's like, we need to be like, this is our normal. These are the people in our community. This is our history. Or if you're in school, it should be, this is what American history actually is. It's to what you were saying too. It's like, what kind of books are our high schoolers reading? Are our middle schoolers reading? Are the kids in elementary school reading? It shouldn't be a debatable thing. It should just be part of our life now, because it is our life. It is what's out there. So it's like, instead of people being like, well, we prefer this whitewash version of it. That's not how things are. That's not a reality anymore. That
you sprung it back into my head. Speaking of whitewashing, this is what I was going to say is we learn in our schools about Martin Luther King Jr. We learn that what he did, that is it. This is how he did it. There was no question about it. People agreed with him, and that was it. That is not the case. At the time when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Fred Hampton and all of these radical, we want to use that word, radical leaders, and I have talked about this before. I have their books on my shelf back there. They were radical. They were blamed for riots. They were blamed for everything. The FBI tried to get Martin Luther King to kill himself. They assassinated Fred Hampton in his bed. These things are not taught to us in school. I had to go out of my way to learn them, and that is unacceptable. I mean, that is a vital part of our history, and we don't know that collectively. Some of us might, but that's the fact that we don't know is unacceptable. I also speak, I don't know if you could see me pointing here. That is a Jane Foster Thor pop Funko on my shelf, which is when we talk about representation, we will be almost certainly, and I will be talking about it because I love Thor, but the female Thor that will be coming up in the next movie will bring representation to a wide group of just young girls going to be able to see a superhero that is strong, that is badass, that can do these things that will inspire them. And I like that character, and I am as masculine as, as ever. And it doesn't take away anything from my masculinity. It doesn't take away from the representation of a straight white male. We have plenty of those characters still, and they still exist, but we can add to them. And I was afraid that you were going to jump on my next question before I asked it, but this either of you can take this one first, but both of you work with kids. Both of you are teachers in one way or another. I mean, technically speaking, yes. How has being a teacher or a professor impacted, and how do you take that experience into the position that you are running for? It just, whether it's in your campaign or whether it would be in your elected capacity. You don't all both have to jump at once.
Larissa, you're right. You gonna jump?
Either way. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. No.
Oh, I guess it's
you
me.
won.
This is interesting because lots of ways, right? So I teach in college. I teach in a teacher ed program for the most part. So most of my students are either current or future teachers. To be honest, part of the reason I even started going to school boards is because I was getting in conversations with my students about how to be advocates in their community, and what does that really mean, and that they had to really understand what was happening in their communities. So I made an assignment to my students saying, we all need to go to school boards. We're going to go to school board meetings where we live. And we're going to go to school board meetings where we work, right? And see what are folks talking about? What do they care about? And then trying to figure out, based on what people care about and what they're talking about, then trying to learn, how can I be useful, right? So my perspective in my teaching is always that, because my program, I should also say, it's a program focused on becoming an educator for social justice. So all of the students in my program have committed to working in marginalized communities, in school districts that are historically underperforming and underserved. So a lot of them, at 18, 19, they come in with this missionary stance of like, I'm going to save everybody, right? So, which is fine. Developmentally, I get that's where they're starting, but that can't be why you're doing the work. So when you come in with that stance, often you look at a community with a deficit perspective and you're like, I know how to fix them. And so I'm trying to flip that and say, no, we don't need to fix anybody. They are fine, but maybe we can be useful. And so I have tried to take that perspective here. So when I first moved to the borough, I thought I wanted to run for school board, but I thought about that and I thought, I don't know what I don't know yet. I don't really understand the borough yet. I don't really know these parents. I'm not sure if I can be useful, and if I can, how can I be useful? So I really laid back for a good long time before I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And because then I wanted to, now I feel like I understand this district. I understand some of its needs. I understand parents, and I understand what the parents care about. And I understand, I feel like I understand this district from like lots of different lenses. So now I feel like I could take that and be useful, right? So I think that I've learned, through the process of going through that process with my students, I'm sort of now like walking the talk, right? I'm doing what I'm asking them to do. And through that, this is how I've sort of come to this spot.
Before you go, Lolly, on this, I want to ask a follow-up on that, Tabitha. When you say we're not going to go fix like these people, and that I totally agree with that. And I actually, what comes to mind for me, and I've said this a number of times before, but it reminds me of Michael Brooks. And I don't know if either of you know who that is, but he was an online podcaster. He was very influential on me starting the show. And he always says, be gentle, or he said, he passed away this past year, but he said, be gentle with the individual, but ruthless with the system. Do you believe that rather than going in to be like, yeah, because I completely agree. You don't have to change people. You have to change the systems in which they operate. Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, here's a, for instance, this is a really, everybody at my job knows that I've complained about this, so this won't be new. But for instance, in order to become a teacher, in order to be admitted into my program, you have to get a certain score on a praxis exam. It's called the praxis core. Now, this is gatekeeping at its best, because I've got students who, are brilliant, but they're having a hard time passing this exam. So what my school does is we have prep classes that we offer for free. Now that is a deficit perspective, because that's like, there's something wrong with them and we're going to fix it, and we're going to put this program in place to fix it. Recognizing structural problems is going to the higher level and saying, we need to get rid of this test. The test is a problem, not these students. This test is not measuring what it says it's measuring, and it's becoming gatekeeping, and often gatekeeping for kids who just, for whatever, because where they lived or wherever, they didn't have the same preparation. There's a story, I think it comes from Nelson Mandela. So forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think it does. So I always have a problem with that goldfish, the starfish story. Like, if we could save one child, I don't like that. But then I heard this similar story from Nelson Mandela. And he says, there's a river, and there's babies floating in the river. And this woman goes over and she sees these babies floating in the river. And she's like, oh my God. So she goes over and she starts pulling the babies out of the river. And this guy comes over and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, there are babies in the river. And he said, well, what should we do? And she said, help me pull them out. So they both start pulling them out of the river. And then she gets up and she walks away. And he's like, where the hell are you going? And she said, I'm going upriver to find out who's throwing these babies in the river. Right. So it's like, we need to find out who's throwing the babies in the river and fix that. And I think that's kind of your point, right?
Oh yeah, I've never heard that, but that is definitely an interesting perspective on way of looking at a broken system, basically. But yeah, that is a interesting metaphor. Lolly, what about you for being an educator? How has that influenced you? And obviously Tabitha has worked with college age folks. You work with kids that are much, much younger. So maybe there's definitely a different perspective there.
Well, I have to take a second and just say that I'm new to the day in, day out teaching thing. I feel like at my core, the thing that I know is I'm an entertainer. I've been doing story times for kids for about 22 years and have so much respect for all of the teachers who are doing this day in and day out. And it's Teacher Appreciation Week today. So oh my God, teachers, I get it. It's hard. I only have 5 kids in my class, and every day I'm still kind of like, okay, what's happening here? That being said, this has been one of my biggest growing years. So in the past, I had the opportunity as an entertainer, as someone who did story times, who connected with kids on that level. It was kind of this little golden situation where it's like the parents would come in with their kiddos. I would have this wonderful one-on-one interaction with them, and was able to kind of open up some doors, some conversations with them. I'll never forget the time that I read Julian Is a Mermaid. If you haven't read that story, you need to go get it right now. It'll take you 5 minutes to read. And it's about a little boy who's in New York City. He's a Hispanic. He has an abuela, and he just loves mermaids. And it's around the time of the mermaid parade, and he sees people on the subway, and he goes home and has just basically makes a mermaid outfit with the curtains, with a fern. He's puts on makeup and everything, all while his abuelo is in the bathtub. And then she comes out, and it's this stern look on her face. And I remember when I read this book for the first time, I had one family who was there who had a little boy who was in a girl's dress, who loves painting his fingernails. And then I had another family who I didn't know how they were going to react to this book. It's like, I don't know. I have people of all political backgrounds, all like, just everything who come to my story times. And I never want to alienate anyone, but I also kind of feel like it's important to validate the person who's not usually getting validated. So anyways, I read the book and everyone loved it. But one of the things that I kept bringing up is like, let's just take this out of like, oh my goodness, this kid is dressing up like a little girl, like a mermaid. Instead of that, let's look at like, this kid is in trouble because he is making an outfit out of things in the house. Would you get in trouble if that happened? He's putting on makeup, would you get in trouble if you're playing with your parents' stuff? And it's like watching the grandmother at the moment. It's like, she looks at him and then she leaves the room and then she comes back with a necklace. And that is working with parents too. And reading that story, it's like, sometimes parents need a minute to process it before they come in and react. Sometimes grandparents need that before they come in and react. And I really loved that moment of like, it's like, I mean, I've lost followers, I've lost supporters because they don't like the fact that I'm bringing this stuff up. I get that. I don't agree with it, but it's like, it's fine. It's like, everyone gets to make their choices. But I think for me, that was like a huge thing as an entertainer, to be able to present this stuff, to present this beautiful story, this beautifully written story, and to have this moment where it's like, hopefully the parents who are reading it and the kiddos who are reading it. It's one of my like most viewed YouTube videos, which I think is really telling, is just like, how much can we learn from this story, whether or not our kids are on the gender spectrum or in the LGBTQ community. Parenting is parenting. And I feel like that's the thing, is we should normalize all this stuff. Now this year I've been like, in my pod that I've been doing, we do Smash the Patriarchy Wednesday. We had like Black History Week. We're going to do AAPI week. We have a kiddo whose mother is a Pacific Islander. And the lady whose house we do it at, she works for immigrant rights action group. And she's out there getting stuff done. She's really working and like doing legislation, just making things happen for people who really need the help. And these kids are seeing this every day. They're learning new things every day. I'm teaching them about like strong, amazing women. And like you were saying earlier, Connor, about the new Thor movie, that it's like, we have this conversation. It's 3 boys and 2 girls, and the 3 boys, I'm like, does it make you any less of a boy to learn about strong women? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's right. Does it make you better to like learn about more people? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So I think that that's really, I feel like it's a little bit of a rant that I'm going on. I feel like for me, it's really important to, I've seen it in action. I've seen how important it is that kids are ready for it. Kids don't care. Kids are just like, this is a great story. They're just like, this person is being hurt. I took, so my boyfriend lives down in Texas, and he travels a lot, so we see each other a lot. Don't worry about it. But I was down there last summer with my kiddo, and it was Breonna Taylor's birthday. And he lives in Denton, Texas. So it's a college town. It's fairly liberal. And his kids were like, we're going to go to a rally. And so we took them to this rally, and it was powerful. There were people who were speaking about their own experiences with racism. There were people who were reading Breonna Taylor's tweets. And, we're talking about a kid who's 7 and a kid who's 9. And this is really their first foray into activism, and it's like, we had made posters, and it's like, walking away from that, they were just like, what's the problem with Black Lives Matter? Why doesn't everyone believe this? It's like, why is this something that not everybody is like jumping up and down to support? That kids get it. They get it. And that's one of the things I love working for kids with, at that age, is that it's all boiled down simplicity. It's just like, they can deal with like the big problems and the big concepts that we're all struggling with, that grownups are struggling with, and they boil it down, and they're just like, this is right and this is wrong. This is compassion and this is bullying. That's it. So I feel like that, ironically, even though I don't have like the traditional like mayor resume, that simple thing of being able to boil down a point and just be like, what's bullying and what's compassion? empathy and what is, just standing in a way just to be difficult, and I think that that's what I would like to bring to this job. And just the other thing is just like being able to be an inspiration for kids who are going to be able to, move forward and to do really important things, that they can be like, that person who I know is a mayor. That person who I know just did this thing. And that, even if I don't win, I hope I win. But if I don't, that it's like, they can still be like, this person over here tried to do this and made a difference. That it's like, kids need to know that it's like, it's possible to make a difference, that you don't have to have the traditional resume in order to make a change. So.
Yeah, and I that's why I was struggling a little bit on how to phrase the question but for both of you, because neither of you are K through 12 teachers, but you are educators in your own right. And, obviously it's important on both ends. And I'm getting free story time from both of you guys because so I'm learning 2 new stories, but let's see. We could just go. I have one question that I will leave off with, and I ask some of my favorite guests. If you could suggest one book or one thing for somebody to read, or it doesn't have to be a full book, or it could be a video, it could be a documentary, it could be something that, or even if I want to keep it open, someone you can learn and they would fully digest everything that you want and they would be able to understand it all, what would it be? And I know that is a hard question to answer on the spot because I did not tell you that. But while you guys think, I can filibuster, but it's, to me, that question means a lot because it can tell you about someone's experiences and it can tell you where you learned from. I mean, I have books that, if I could just hand to somebody and be like, this is it, it would mean our world would be more empathetic. It would be more understanding. It would be equitable. It would be, there's a lot to go into there, but, Tabitha, we haven't heard from you in a while. So, and that's totally cool too, by the way. This is what podcasting is for. It's for ranting. Usually I talk to myself for an hour. So it's nice to have you both here to counteract my lunacy.
Yeah. So, this is hard, right? Because there's no one thing. There's no magic pill, right? So I'm gonna say 2 things, and then when we hang out, I'm gonna perseverate over like, oh, I should have said this, right? I'm sure I will. This is good. Like I'm gonna think about this all week. But so one is there was a professor I had at the University of Pennsylvania named Howard Stevenson. He is a psychologist. He works in social emotional learning in particular. He has a TED Talk where he shares stories really about his own parenting and conversations he's had with his son that really relate to the work. And in particular, the struggles that boys have and Black boys in particular, but boys in general. And it's interesting because the idea of threats to masculinity have come up a little bit in this conversation. So I would say anything Howard Stevenson does is magic, but a TED Talk's super accessible. See, I'm already now I'm starting to think of other things as because podcasts and, okay. So
it's hard. Yeah. I know it's hard.
It's so
I asked
hard,
this
right?
question and I don't even really have an answer myself, but
yeah. So all right. So TED Talk, Howard Stevenson. Okay. There's two more, but I'll give you one.
You can give me everything you want. I will not say. All right. I'm not going to really limit you, but
no, I'm not. I'm not going to give you everything. I'm not going to give you everything. But okay, so we'll say Howard Stevenson's TED Talk. There are a few podcasts, and one in particular, I want to say it's through. It might be This American Life. And the episode is called The Problem We All Live With. And in that episode, The Problem We All Live With, there's a reporter who outlines how in the 1970s, which is when I was little, the achievement gap between Black and white kids was closing. Now, remember what I said earlier, 1970 is where the multicultural ed push started. In the 1970s, we were doing things in schools that were much more about equitable practices and multicultural ed, and the gap was closing. And then Ronald Reagan and some different philosophies, and boom, now it's okay. So that's and there's a current day example of integration and how that works. So The Problem We All Live With, and then there's a fictional book, but it's kind of like historical fiction. It totally changed me. So it's a book called Homegoing. I want to say that the author is Ya Gyasi, like YAA and then GYASI. I listened to it as an audiobook because pre-COVID, I do a lot of commuting. And I thought, this is a book that I thought I understood stuff. And then I listened/read this book, and I'm like, oh, this book helped me understand why anybody would ever argue for reparations. And now I get it. And now I support it. Right. But I think before I listened to this book, I would have said I supported it, but I didn't feel it. Like I knew I was supposed to say that, but I didn't really get it. Well, what this book does, like I said, it's fiction, but it starts on the African continent with people indigenous people on the continent, their lives. And then the Dutch settlers get there, and then slavery starts. And basically what it follows is a lineage of a family from pre-colonization to present day US. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like I just saw the dots connect. This author was brilliant. It literally, it changed me. I recommend it all the time.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to pick one of those up at the local bookstore. Lolly, your chance to go.
Okay. So I feel like if anybody out there has not seen I'm Not Your Negro, that they need to go watch it right now. Because James Baldwin, I think, is he changed my life. I mean, it's yes, you got it. I think that he's one of the most elegant people I've ever seen. He's elegant and eloquent. And also he's connected with all of these unbelievable people from history, just to kind of like hearing his lived experiences. And unfortunately, hearing how little things have changed since then, that it's the same conversation that's happening is so sobering. And if it doesn't light a fire under you and tell you that you need to get involved in the process right now, then, I don't know what to say. A children's book author, illustrator that I think everyone should start getting obsessed with right now is Christian Robinson. He's, I can't say enough about him, but he's one of those people where it's not over the top, anti-racist kind of stuff. Oh, wait, I just thought of another one. Dagnabbit. Anyhow, he's just wonderful. He's queer. He's he grew up, his grandmother raised him. And so on Mother's Day last year, he made the sweetest post about what Mother's Day means to him. And I just feel like he's just one of those wonderful people. And his illustrations do remind me of Ezra Jack Keats, just that super wonderful, sweet, simple wonderfulness. But he's so good at when it comes to inclusion. I feel like everybody should just go out and buy his entire collection. He's brilliant. So yeah, definitely. And also this is one that not very many people know. Anastasia Higginbottom. She's she's definitely super far left, and I love her, but she has a children's book called, Death is Stupid and Divorce is the Worst, I think, which is really kind of interesting. She has one that's about white privilege, and another one about growing up queer as a kid. So, I mean, it's like not very many people know about her, and it's like you kind of have to hunt down her books. So I know that's 3. Sorry, call it.
That's you guys each gave me 3, so it's all right. And I will point out too that I do kind of like those books where you have to go and like search a little bit. There's a little bit of the hunt in it, and I think that's fun. But yeah, it's okay to give me more than one. I know the question's for 1, but the problem is that even for myself, like I could list 10 different things that would come to my mind. And, you know, of course, this podcast would be top of the list, but
absolutely.
But, you know, again, it's something that I was discussing today. There's always more to learn. And if you can consistently just read, and this is why I asked the question, is like, okay, I have a few things that I have to go listen to and read because it's something that's important to me. I want to point out that one book that I haven't talked about on this show yet, but it comes to mind piggybacking off of what you guys have both said, is a book called White Rage. It's not White Fragility, which everyone has been reading this past year. I had I forget his name. I doubt he's ever going to see this, but a man that I met at the gym in 2019 when I was running for office, and he noticed that I was running for office. We never spoke before, but he just came up to me and he said, I got your flyer at my door, which, by the way, another reason why you get involved locally is it's really, really easy to make these connections, and you can really help people by going door to door. But he noticed that, and he came and talked to me, and we spent like 2 hours just talking. And he's like 70-year-old black man and coming up to his 23-year-old white kid running for supervisor. And he said, you read this book and you tell me what you think of it. And it was amazing. It is mind-bogglingly, that's not even a word, but it is so eye-opening. And things like that we need. And that's why I asked the question. It's just every so often you get that interaction, you get that book, you get that podcast, you get that song, and it just opens your mind and you go down the rabbit hole, and it's fun. I mean, that's what makes learning fun and growing fun.
White Rage is really good. And because she does such a good job with the history. Yeah. All the gaps. I mean, I thought I knew stuff, and then I read that and I was like, ooh, like she filled in a lot of, yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good one.
I've talked about some of these before too, but the Shock Doctrine, if anyone hasn't read that, go read that. That is a more modern viewpoint of shock therapy when it comes to disaster capitalism and how rich capitalists can make more money off of disaster. And specifically, it talks about the overthrowing of the Chilean government in 1973, I believe, and how that led to the U.S. invasion. Well, it didn't lead to, but how it impacted the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and the rebuilding, if you want to call it that, of Iraq following, and we're still in that war. But that book and the assassination of Fred Hampton as well, because that one is, again, I learned about COINTELPRO, which I had no freaking clue about beforehand. And the fact that Fred Hampton's mother was Emmett Till's babysitter. And if for those who don't know, Emmett Till was someone that was falsely accused, a kid who was falsely accused of, I believe, rape, and was then lynched and burned. And the fact that we have that in connection with Fred Hampton, who was assassinated, and the history and the history and the history, but we don't learn that. So all of that is to say, read some books after this. and if you ever need more suggestions, the three of us have got you hooked up for every age group. With that being said, I will open it to either, again, which one of you ever wants to go first, just raise your hand so that you guys can just pick. But I want you guys to give your final pitch as to why it's important to vote in, first of all, in primary elections. I'll point out that Tabitha is in a race. Well, you're both in contested races, but Tabitha is in a race where you can cross file, which very, very briefly, meaning that you can file for both the Democratic and the Republican side. So voting in a primary really, really, really matters. And obviously, Lolly's in a contested primary within the Democratic Party. But either one of you can go first. But your final pitch, why is it important to vote in local elections? And why is it important to vote for you? Go ahead.
So I found out that I had an interesting conversation yesterday with my friend Dan, your friend Dan, about, well, first of all, only 12 to 17% of registered voters turn out for primary municipal elections. And these are the elected officials that are going to be making all the big decisions in your life. So that's why it's really important to get out for local elections and primary elections. Like we were talking about, that's where your choice is. Just look at the bigger picture with Bernie and Hillary, or like this past one. It's like, if you get out there, then the person that you really, really want will get into, past the primaries. So that's important. But when I was talking to Dan, like we did the numbers, crunched the numbers, and it's like, it comes down to a few votes. Connor, you just said that, how few you lost by. We realized that, that I think it's under 1,000 votes of like Democratic people in the borough who are going to decide who's going to be the mayor right now. So that's pretty wild. It could really come down to a coin toss if we all tie. So who knows? But it's like, it's just the margin of error is so small. So get out and vote, because also, if you're getting out to vote for whatever reason, if you're coming out to vote for me, you're going to vote for Tabitha too. So there's so many important people. Mark Lomax we have to get him in as sheriff. He's just unbelievable. And he is listening to us. He is, he's a good leader. He's just such a wonderful person that if we're out there voting for one candidate that we care about, we can also down the ballot vote for other strong candidates as well. Connor, I'm sure that people can go to you for all of the finest candidates that you should vote for.
And it's actually before you can continue after this, but it's actually the way I view it. If you can find someone at the smallest, most local level, you can vote up the ballot, not down the ballot. You vote up the ballot, because who knows what the prothonotary is? Who knows what some of these countywide positions are? I mean, unfortunately, I do, but for most people, most people don't. So you find the person like Tabitha or Lolly, and you vote up the ballot. But go ahead. Sorry, you can continue.
No, I mean, I just think that's it. Is like, this is where our voice means the most right now. So, and a lot of people don't turn out. So this is your opportunity. Whoever's watching, I don't know if they'll be able to see us or just hear us, but this is your opportunity to really make a difference that is going to impact. I mean, it's going to impact our town. If you're thinking about my candidacy, and for Tabitha, it's going to impact our kids' lives for a really long time in the future. So that's super important. And you should vote for me, because I am not afraid to be really bold about standing up against racism. I'm a huge ally for the LGBTQ community, for youth voices. I feel like, one of the biggest things that a mayor should be able to do is shine a light on people who need the attention on them. It's like, that's kind of what a mayor is like the giant spotlight holder. Let's, bring attention to some of these people who are doing amazing things and figure out how we can get them involved. So, I will do that. I'm currently doing it already. I just don't have the official title of mayor, but it's just something that I feel really strongly about. So that's my pitch.
Awesome. Oh, and just where can people find more about you?
Oh, at lollyformayor.com.
Great. All right, Tabitha, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I can add a whole lot to why I vote, but I do, it is important, especially in the primary, because if folks just sort of let the primary roll, your choices for in November are, then they're limited too, and that then you might not even have the choice you wanted. So don't take anything for granted. Like, I have a strong social media presence, and I know people are like, "Oh, you got this." Not necessarily, right? So, and even if I do, come out and but there are three of us running for my seat, and like Lolly said, there's only so many votes. There's only so many people who come out. Once that gets split three ways, we're we need everybody to come out, and it's fun, and it's like takes 2 minutes, and just do it. So yes. And I think one of the biggest reasons to vote for me is because it's funny. One of my opponents said this last night, but I don't think he and I mean the same thing. We need diversity of thought on the board. And right now, the board is very skewed in one direction. Now, I recognize, and I said this earlier today, that on the continuum of conservative to progressive, I'm pretty far on the progressive side. But I'm probably the only one who's like that, right? So if I'm not there, then there's no chance for like a really interesting and deep discussion to happen, because and I would say the same thing. I would say don't vote off the most conservative person, because all those voices are important. The diversity of voices is important. But the other thing is, like, I'm a mom, I live here, I'm a teacher educator, and I really, really do believe strongly in figuring out where I could be useful, not imposing what I think on the community. So I really want to listen to what people think. Like, just for instance, somebody just recently said to me about full day kindergarten. Well, when I had little ones, that was really important to me. I forgot, because it doesn't impact me anymore. But now that a few people have said that to me, I'm like, oh, we need to look at this. I looked at the plan from 5 years ago. Investigation of that is on the plan. They didn't do it. So, I share that example to say, I really want to listen. I know I don't know everything. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to have my beliefs challenged. But I also will stand for what I believe in and try to get other people to see through my lens as well. So there's give and take. So I think I'll work really hard I know I will work really hard for you. And I think I could do a lot of good for the district.
And where can people find more about you?
Oh yeah. So many places, but let me see. I think my website is Dr. Tab at Dr. Tab, the letter 4, cbsd.com.
Perfect. I will, in my capacity as chairman, say that we should be voting out those people that are on the far right, because I want to get them out. But I understand where you're coming from, but I want them personally. My goal is to defeat the Republican Party. That's just my goal. But
no, I get it. But I do think it's because yes, but I wouldn't want whatever percentage of the community to feel disenfranchised. Just like I don't want to feel disenfranchised. So it's a tough, it's a thinker.
I understand. We will respectfully disagree on the minutia of things, because I think I understand where you're coming from. I will also point out, if you are in Pennsylvania, you are listening to this, you are watching us on YouTube, May 18th, one more time, May 18th to vote. If you want to get involved, you either reach out to me, or you reach out to these candidates, or you reach out, if you're not in Doylestown, to a local candidate that can get you plugged in. Going door to door, making phone calls, making texts, posting on social media, all this stuff adds up to getting good people elected. But like we said, if you don't vote in the primary, you don't get the candidates you like. If you don't get involved in the primary and in the party, you don't get the candidates that you want. So we start it, we run for these positions, we make the change that we want to be. With that being said, I will say thank you to Tabitha and Lolly for joining me. If you guys want to learn more about them, you can check out their websites. Follow our show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube. Hit the subscribe button down below if you are watching, or hit the thumbs up if you are enjoying it. Leave a comment down below what you thought about this interview. And if you would like to support the show for as little as $5 a month, you can go to patreon.com/theconoshow, and you will help us grow the progressive movement here on YouTube and in general. So thank you again, both of you. And until next week, guys, stay safe. Peace.